Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Poetry Salon cast. With me, I am Tresha Haefner, and I am your host. And today, I'm so excited because we are going to be talking with Jennifer K. Sweeney. And of course, I just realized this, Jennifer. I haven't pulled up your bio. I think I had it up just a moment ago, but I want to make sure that everyone knows where to get your books, including my cat who's meowing back there at the French doors. I might have to let her
Yes,
in.
I love
We're
that.
so prepared here. Okay, Jennifer K. Sweeney is the author of three other poetry collections, including Little Spells, How to Live on Bread and Music, and Salt Memory. Her newest collection, though, is Fox Logic Fireweed, which is winner of the Backwater Prize in Poetry. And yeah, I'm really excited to get to talk to you. And I've just put this up on the share screen. The cover of this book, Jennifer, is so delicious.
Oh,
I don't know
thank
what
you.
that is. Ignore that part. Oh, sorry. This is the thing that is so deliciously beautiful. This fox image, it's so vibrant. I just love it. And the way this is going to work is, first of all, I'm going to gush over lots of things about you, but I'm also going to ask you to read a poem, and then we'll kind of talk about the backstory of that and see where that leads, and we'll get to know a little bit about the person behind the poem. So when you're ready, go ahead and give that a read.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. So this one is called What Turkeys Can Teach Us About Grief in Suburbia. That it moves in circles, that you don't need to be poised or eloquent, the pressure scouring you to orate by noon the true and succinct words, vastly withal, then vastly alone, stuffed with food or void of it, the coffee too hot in the thin styrofoam, the coffee so cold in the night pot. The turkeys advise against polarity or wisdom. Walk with us, our upland kind. Steady the loop of our walking under the crisscross wires, under the live oak and the story of its rustling. To be swept in a quiet shape, together around any small death. Fender struck cat, being of our being, what fallen birdlet we never knew. We gather the pieces of each other and walk them round the cul-de-sac, one holding what the other cannot. The procession need not advance, nor march toward any heavy door waiting to close. Let the ownership of grief be the shadow of a wheel and its moving parts. And if one sounds the rattling drum from the well, we bow our necks and sound the terrible beauty that weeps us. Body we knew, or body we could never understand, which once we heard yowling in the night, crouched and feline like a locked spring. We watched the magnificent creature leap toward the sound of its mousetrap throat, and our hearts shuddered open in our baskety bodies. We watched the dark fur of it fly toward itself, claw thing, no wings anywhere. Limp dead street, the lights creaking on at dusk. Round and round. Oh, moon, what are we to do with all these feathers?
All right, Jennifer K. Sweeney. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really glad you chose this poem to discuss because I've kind of a fascination and maybe even an affinity for turkeys, wild turkeys.
Yeah.
And I'll say a little bit more about that later, but first I want to hear from you. what instigated this poem? Do you have a lot of turkeys in your neighborhood? Were these wild turkeys or tell me the backstory of this poem.
Yeah, I mean, I did grow up in New England, and so I would see some wild turkeys sometimes, but that wasn't necessarily the instigation for this. So many poems come from like the inside out, and very rarely do they come from like the outside in, for me at least. And
Hmm.
so this one actually is. It comes from the outside in. There was a video going around, and I never write poems like this, but that's why I chose it because it just comes from a different place. And it was all of these turkeys in a neighborhood suburban street, and I think maybe Massachusetts, so kind of back in my New England zone. And they were in a cul-de-sac and they were walking ceremoniously in a circle for hours around a cat, a dead cat. And I
Oh,
just couldn't
wow.
get the image out of my mind. And this book came out in 2020. And at the time, I was thinking about ways that we fail at grief and what is an adequate response to grief. And I couldn't stop thinking about these turkeys just walking together in a circle for hours.
Hmm.
Um, and so then that kind of came back to me, especially as I was reading from the book in my pandemic living room in 2020, trying to promote this book and thinking about, oh my gosh, what is our collective response to grief right now? Um, yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting to think about this in context of the pandemic. Time capsule. It's like that was such a big deal for such a long period of time. It felt so long, and yet now we don't talk about it that often. It feels kind of like this blip that we went through, that we came out of. So yeah, without you giving that backstory in that context, I wouldn't immediately think about this in terms of the pandemic. But now that you say it, it makes total sense that this is about processing a grief and how do we do, and collectively too, especially at a time when all of us were kind of denied or cut off from some of the ways we would do things collectively. Oh wow. Yeah. I'm so curious. Have you done any research? Because I am not actually an expert on turkeys. I said that I have a little bit of an interest in them, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm not an expert. Have you done any research on like why they do that, why they act that way?
I tried to follow some threads to try to figure out why this happened, and I couldn't uncover anything. But again, novice here.
Uh-huh.
There are many topics through which I will research pretty extensively, and this one, like, I think I just let it be the strange thing that happened. And, but I would like to find out more, of course.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I'm wondering if there's some research grant we could get on the funeral patterns of turkeys. There may not already be an answer because maybe people haven't yet put a lot of thought into how turkeys grieve. I think
yeah.
that is kind of the place of poetry, though, is like, you see something interesting and, the scientist wants to do some research project and see if we can collect data and all this other stuff. And the poet says, let me figure out what it means to me, whether it's
Yeah.
accurate or not. I mean, this is the invitation for us to think creatively and kind of explore our own feelings through this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is this a metaphor or does this have something to teach me about a subject through which I claim to be not very good at, through which I am still a novice, aren't we all at grief? Who's got that down? So um, I found it so profound, the idea of just moving silently together as a group around,
Yeah.
especially that the body was a body, a turkey and a cat but they're so different from each other, not like even around another bird or something of their kind, but that there was still this homage to this other being. And so I kind of tried to
Yeah.
imagine maybe the time they once saw a cat and what they might have thought about the cat. Just how magnificent the locked kind of spring pounce of the cat would be to a turkey whose body is so different. Um, yeah, I just liked the idea of animals considering each other and paying kind of homage, no matter what
Hmm.
creature it was.
Yeah, no, that is really fascinating. I think quite a lot about, oh, how are animals different from people? But I never think about what does an animal think of another animal. I mean, I have cats. I know when they see smaller birds, I know exactly what they think. They think lunch, and we think free cat toys. Yeah, yeah, that is really quite interesting. You're getting me thinking about all the different angles of poetry I've yet to explore myself. Um, so I said that I have a little bit of an interest in turkeys because I didn't
Yeah,
grow up
out
in
with
New
it.
England. Huh?
I said,
Up
yeah,
with
out
it?
with it.
I mean, I don't think it's anything, that surprising, but I grew up in California and I just remember there were occasions where wild turkeys would land on the lawn. And, they're, if anyone has never seen a turkey or a wild turkey, like they're not exactly the most beautiful of birds. And they're large and they're usually black and they're quite dark and yeah, I don't want to be mean to the turkey, but they're not known for their beauty. Let's put it that way. And then I didn't see any for quite a long time, and now I live in North Carolina, and I don't know, like last summer I was just driving, and all of a sudden there's like this flock of wild turkeys, and I'm just like, oh wow, that takes me back, and it's my childhood, and it's like you're really connected to the wild and this thing we associate with Thanksgiving and just eating and lunch meat, but it's here and it's got its own
Yeah,
life and it's not in a pen and like I don't know, there's something just mysterious, but not in this when you see like a pretty little sparrow, it's so pretty. These are like meaty, heavy, dark birds. So they're fascinating.
just managing the heft of that, and obviously birds, are rife to so many like beautiful, free flowing metaphors, and just this very grounded, portly, like um, uh, creature that we maybe like accidentally see, just in the course of looking outside your backyard, the presence of a turkey. It's, kind of an amazing thing. So the idea of, a whole wheel of them circling together quietly, that just really stayed with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like how they are like this metaphor for grief. You said something else earlier about how a lot of your poems come from the inside out instead of the outside in. I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone put it that way. Could you say a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that even if I go in with an idea that's sort of been floating around in my head, there's this sense of I don't want to go in with an aboutness, like I'm going to write a poem about, And I think that's a fine prompt, but for me, that's like just sudden death, like I'm putting myself on a road and here I know which road I'm going to be on. So I do much better if there's much more like associative things that I'm thinking about, and then somehow in the process of showing up, those things start to connect or show me a path I haven't thought of before. So this one, I was like, gosh, am I doomed to write about this thing I keep thinking about because I've already got this aboutness kind of in my head.
Yeah.
But of course, I didn't know that I was going to lean so into what it reveals about grief and what we can take from it as people, and what's left to be, learned, or what in my own life about grief. And
Yeah. You said that no one really is an expert on grief, which, first line alert, everyone listening, that could be the first line of a poem. Please make sure you credit Jennifer. But I learned something recently. I think it's one of the Nordic countries. Like if no one shows up at a funeral, they'll hire a poet to show up and read a poem at the funeral. And I was doing some research on like unusual jobs or jobs no one ever tells you about. And one of them is professional mourner. Like there are people who you can hire to
Wow,
show up at funerals. I
amazing.
think because it's like wanting to make it seem like the person was more beloved or well known than they actually were.
Yeah.
Um, So when you say, a professional at grieving, I'm like, actually, I think there are. But I, I don't know that they actually grieve. I think they might be there to, demonstrate grief and put on a performance
Yes.
of grief, which is different from being a professional um, griever. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Maybe that's someone to call up and do an interview with them and find out what it means to be a professional mourner like that. And do they follow the rituals of the turkey vulture? Um, well, thank you so much for sharing that poem. I think another question that I have is, as you were writing this, this is a longer poem, and it certainly seems like there's a lot to unpack with it. Uh, I, if you can say a little bit about how long it took you, how many drafts it took you to get to this point, um, could you say a little bit about that process?
I could try. I'm not sure I remember the writing of this very intensely. Sometimes I have my poems, that sometimes people's poems sort of all kind of look a certain way, and that's just
Mhm.
part of their voice, and that's totally great. But I can write a very tiny little lyric poem, and then I can write a really long poem, and I kind of know when I'm in it which road how long I'm gonna go. And this one, I think, as I heard some things that the turkeys have us to teach us about grief, I heard more and more and more. And the poem kind of wanted to circle itself many times, like that motion. I think there's
Yeah.
not even it even resists punctuation sometimes. There's just that sense of let's keep going. It's in continuous verse on the page, so there's not a lot of kind of break in that. It's really like sort of staying with the thought and then trying to circle it. So I think this is one that I just kept following, kind of intuitively. Oh, there's more. There's more. This isn't something to crunch in and pull out just the one thread, and let it shine. This is something to sort of just keep um, tracing, I guess, if
Yeah.
you will. Yeah.
One could certainly argue the whole thing is that, if we're talking about threads, a whole cloth woven from all of these threads that kind of weaves together. The whole thing, I think, shines. Yeah, that is really lovely. And I want to also just say again, because I absolutely love looking at this image here, that this comes from your book that has the beautiful title here, Fox Logic Fireweed. Before we move on from this poem, I do kind of want to know a little bit about the title of this book as well. When we're thinking of titles for books and which poems go into that book, I've been thinking a lot about how you assemble a manuscript, and people will say something like, think about each poem in relationship to the title, or the title in relationship to each poem. And does the title work with this poem? If not, maybe this poem doesn't belong in the collection, or maybe if not, maybe that title doesn't work for the collection. Anyways, that's one of like several pieces of advice that seems impossible to completely follow. So anyways, that's a long way of me asking, do you want to say a little bit about the title of this collection and where it comes from?
Yeah, sure. There isn't, I don't think, let's see, let me just double check. There is a title poem, but that isn't where the title came from. The title came from a certain kind of poem in here, which is one of those more tiny lyric poems that's sonic and kind of almost like surreal, very like a dream. And the poem is called The Somnambulist, which is like the sleepwalker. And as much as I wanted this book to be about the strangeness of the real things of the world, I also want there to be this space for, I guess, the wonder and sort of dream consciousness to sort of
Yeah.
intersect with all those really tangible material things. So in this particular poem, I think it wrote itself quite like a dream. And there's a line of questioning in the poem that says, "Is it fox logic, fireweed?" As a little piggyback of questions, and it's kind of right in the middle of the piece. Meant sort of to question, kind of the power or the space that comes to the creator in the middle of the night.
Mm,
So there are lots of poems about animals in this book and plants that are occur in kind of inland Southern California, moving toward the desert, which is a super different landscape for me. I've lived in a lot of different places, and when I got here, I could not acclimate to the heat, just that kind of semi-arid. It took me a really long time to get comfortable here.
wow.
So all of those species come up here in this book. And so that was a way of like taking that question and rephrasing it kind of as a statement
Yeah.
that would bring in kind of the animal sort of dream wonder and the plant kind of dream wonder, but also in fireweed, we get fire, the presence of fire. These foxes on the cover almost look like they're flame-ish, so somehow that kind of captured the spirit of the whole inquiry of the landscape that was really new to me during the time that I was writing the book.
Oh, wonderful. I was born in California and I've kind of lived all over California. It's interesting hearing you say that you weren't used to the landscape because for me, I'm like, what's not to be used to? It's what I grew up with, It's like but that's of course I know that not everyone is born with it. I have a friend who grew up on the East Coast, grew up in New England also. And when she came out to the San Diego area, she said she felt like she was driving on the moon because there's all these, hills, and then on the hills are these rocks that just have exposed rock and the shrubs coming up between the rocks and like not nearly as many gigantic trees and I'd never thought about what that would be like. And now I live on the East Coast. I'm like, oh, it's so green. There's so much forest. You're right. Going out to California and San Diego and the desert, it is weird. It is so different in comparison. So um I know I picked another poem for you to read but since you were talking about this because I asked, how about let's have you read Fox Logic, the title poem of the book.
Okay, let me grab it. Okay. Fox Logic Fireweed. When I say it breathed inside the house, I mean I felt the air swell around me. I was upstairs, it was behind me. I was downstairs, it was roiling across the room. From all angles I was turned. When I say it breathed, I mean also that it shrieked, the sound so dislocating and new it was heat and certainty, like steam shearing up out of the earth, like lightning branding snow. My feet were strange to me, my hands careless and flimsy. It was behind me, at my neck, as if I could reach out and tremble its vapors. I was circling, my arms lifted when I saw the tribe of foxes press at the back door, searing their cries upward into the house. We locked in awe, wild eyes, until the darkness stole us back to our separate worlds.
Oh, the darkness stole us back to our separate worlds. Yeah, that is a great way of putting what kind of encounter feels like. Now, of course, I have to ask, did this really happen? Was
Yeah.
there was really a tribe of foxes that showed up at your door?
Yeah, there really was. And there are a lot of like little animals in the yard kind of poems in here, or strange instances of animals in the yard poems in this book. And yeah, we had a lot of foxes that lived around here for a while. But one night I was alone in the house and they were all kind of gaggled at the door, making a sound at the same time. And I loved how it changed me in my body so suddenly. I just lost all sense of where I was and how I was positioned into space, and I had to rearrange myself quickly. And then that moment where we had that, just that flash meeting, I perceive you, you perceive me, and then it's gone. Um, Beautiful moments that we can just catch for a second.
I'm so jealous. I lived in California, Southern California for a very long time. I don't think I've ever seen a wild fox anywhere except the zoo. So did you put out a specific meat or something to lure them there, or
No.
did they just sense your
I did
poetic
not lure the
nature?
foxes. No. We live near kind of a park that's very rustic. Like there's mountain lions in the park. There's all kinds of things in that park. It's not parky like come play with kids. It's more like walking trails. And so I think that they kind of had this little route that they would take at night. Um, there's another poem in the book about having 100 owls outside my house in a circle. And that is because in San Bernardino, in I think it's 20, 17 maybe. I'm trying to
Hmm.
remember exactly the year, 2015 maybe. 2015, I think we had the horrible shooting that occurred where 14
Oh
people were shot. And I was a part of a mother's group at that time, and my kids were very small. And the husband of one of the moms in the mother's group was there and was shot 7 times and survived. And for a while after that incident, they thought that a third gunman was in this park that I speak of. So all over our house were helicopters, helicopters, helicopters. And they were saying, get in your house. And I was upstairs in the room with my tiny little kids, and my husband was at work. And it was just this crazy, like, domestic moment where calamity was sort of right over the house. And because of the circling, circling, circling of the helicopters, all of the owls that lived in that park came down, maybe not all of them, but like hundreds of them came down, and they were all like very low in our trees, not where they normally are. They were low. And we were
wow.
sitting, reeling from the whole thing. And I said to Chad, there's a chorus of owls outside. And we went outside, and they were just all out there. Again, that collective grief moment of animals. And
Yeah.
we were in the center. So I just feel like there's been some amazing things that have happened that where domestic and natural world just have maybe eclipsed.
Hmm.
And I try to capture those moments, in this book. So that's just another one of them. Yeah.
Oh, I love this subject matter. This is a really I don't know if you read Mark Doty's The Art of Description, that book. Are you familiar with that? Because
I
I think
am.
he talks about in that, I think it's the first chapter, it's somewhere close to the beginning of the book about how when you encounter the animal, because they don't speak in a human way and they can't speak for what they're going through or what they are trying to say or feeling, like it really calls on the poetic voice. It makes us really, our imaginations kick into gear because we're thinking like, well, what are you thinking? You're not telling me, so I got to think about it myself. And so I got to imagine, or, you know, someone say we're projecting our feelings onto them, but scientists are finding more proof that animals feel things and stuff, and like they have their
Absolutely.
rituals and everything too. So, yeah. So I mean, I think it's something that's just, um, I'm always fascinated by it. You can show me 100 poems about animals. I'm going to want to read 100 more. I never get tired of this subject in poetry, especially if it's pioneering new territory.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree, Tresha. I really, it's kind of a flood subject for me too. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I still do want to hear Orb Reader as well, and that one I
We'll
have
just
up
stay with our
here.
animals, right?
I know. Part of me wants to ask, have you ever written a poem that's not about animals? But I know you have. I've seen some about children, which you kind of argue is the same thing. Like, you know, I have a nephew now who uh he's not obsessed with foxes, but my sister is. And so like he's got little fox outfits and all this stuff. And sometimes in poetry, I just like I'm just like, well, why can't you be a fox? You're dressed like a fox. I'm going to call you a fox instead of calling you, baby. And it's just like, I lift up the fox. I feed, whatever. So, but it's the same thing. It's like he hasn't yet been able to articulate what his lived experience is. So I'm thinking, what, what is going through your head there? How
Mm.
are you experiencing this moment? It's like, and then they start talking. And then they tell you, and you don't have to imagine nearly as much. So, yeah, let's move on to the Orb Weaver when you're ready. We'll give it a read.
Sure. I'll just say that this poem, even though it's about animals and a lot of poems, there's a lot of animals in Fox Logic Fireweed, it came from a different impetus. So I wanted, having lived in many different areas of California, and spending a lot of time in redwood forests. My husband and I got married in a redwood forest. It's just a very sacred place to, I think, a lot of us that live on
Mm,
the West Coast or have lived on the West Coast. I wanted to try to come up with a poetic, as much as a poetic transmission of the experience of the redwood forest as I could. And so I worked on this book for ages. It's finally going to come out next year. Just going to places, slowly writing, and just kind of keeping it on the side until I had the full thing. But most of the poems in this book are either written from the imagined perspectives of the creatures, the trees, the plants, the fungi, the rocks that you would find in the redwood forest.
mm,
And this was one of the earlier ones that I wrote. So I'm trying to, work with the eye to some degree. That is not my eye, but of course, I am the eye writing it. And to do this kind of asked me to come as close outside of the borders of myself to a kind of listening of what I might hear on the other side. And just, if it felt authentic, I kept it. If it felt like it wasn't really, I didn't believe it was really the voice of that thing, I let it go.
yeah,
And I let myself really take my time here. So this is one of these pieces, and this is the voice, the imagined voice of the orb weaver.
yeah.
Orb weaver. I'm particular as an eye, unwritten as a lament, teeth in my net, I sing in circles a rare translucence. Labyrinth, sheath, water laces me into being. I am the cold, morning light halved like relief, sculpture and silence, isinglass, air. All matter comes from me. The wind unspools milk from the pods. It strips the palms bare. But cage, cage, I hold a little pocket of gravity. I hold, rainbow quick, the rope and swallow.
Mm. Now, if I am remembering correctly, the orb weaver spiders are kind of like they're like a little dot with very long, spindly legs. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
And then they have these really geometrically beautiful, precise, very type A personality webs.
Yeah.
Everything is
It's where you're like,
absolutely
okay,
perfect.
math is divine. Maybe I didn't understand it, but it's spiritual,
Yeah,
when you
it's
look at that kind of a web, right?
you can feel a little inferior, like, wow, this spider gets how to do perfect geometry, whereas everything, yeah, I can't even draw a perfect circle. But yeah, they when I lived in Costa Rica and the tropics, we'd see them all over the place. And like on one hand, they're huge, but they're very unintimidating because they're so light and just it's like you could sneeze and imagine it floating away. It's not like a black widow or a tarantula. um
Hmm.
yeah, so I've got to ask, like, are there a lot of orb weavers out where you are?
Yeah, we would see them for sure. And I would see them, hiking sometimes, just spending a really quiet amount of time where I love the way that in a certain frame of light, you would miss it entirely, and then the light glints a certain thing, and the entire circular kind of majesty is revealed, and you think, oh, that was just right there. But I failed to see it until it was just lit in such a
Um,
way. There's so much wonder in the making of this creature. So I wonder was really like at the heart of what I wanted to try to capture.
yeah. Oh man, what a beautiful way of describing it too. And I know what you mean because yeah, I think I don't know if everyone's had this moment. I hope everyone gets to have one of those moments where you're looking at something and all of a sudden you realize like, oh, this is a spider web. Sometimes it looks like the spiders are just hanging there invisibly in the air,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's your indication that there's a web. And then you have to look at a certain angle or after the rain or the light hits it a certain way, and then you see like how cool that web is. Um,
Hmm.
or you don't see it and you walk straight into it in the forest, and all of a sudden you're just screaming, going, what is this? What is this? Um, yeah, wow. That's just such a beautiful description. I This may be a silly question. I'm curious if at any point you were tempted to bring arachne into this. I mean, because obviously they're called orb weavers, so that's got such a great association with um, Arachne, who, if you haven't followed Greek mythology in a while, it's like she was the woman who wove so well that I think she tempted Athena to turn her into a spider, and that's the story of how spiders are. Anyways, yeah, I'm so curious if like you were drawing from any of that or if you were intentionally trying not to get her into it.
Yeah, I kind of was trying intentionally not to get her into it. I mean, that would be like a totally different direction and a really cool one to take.
Yeah.
But as I was working with these I voices, I was thinking, okay, like the I can't be the human voice. I know about Arachne, but the spider doesn't know about. That's not like the spider's lexicon. And so I
Yeah.
do use metaphor in here that the spider wouldn't necessarily know what isinglass is. Of course, that's not part of its world. That's a human-made thing. And after I wrote this poem, I think this was maybe the last one where I even used human metaphors in the pieces, but this one felt kind of true to itself, and I left it alone. But I even moved away from doing that so as to try to, what is morning to a bear? I think I call it seeing time when I write from the bear's point of view. I just tried to go like, let's forget about my language and what's its language or what could be its language, what could be its syntax. The bear poem is kind of clumsy in its syntax, kind of lumbers. It's that kind of things are a little out of order. So I try to just sort of like let some of that my own like inclinations unravel and back away. And that was a useful place to try to access the more than human world that felt interesting to me and new,
Yeah.
and kind of fun. Yeah.
Now that we're talking about it, I am looking at just the structure of the poem, the way it lays on the page, and it does have this. I don't know if confinement is quite the right word, but it's a thinner poem, and you can kind of see that it's balanced. Not a lot of lines that are going way different from all the other lines in here, and that kind of, to me, what that says is it's mimicking the way a spider um, is, like everything being kind of precise and measured and even and balanced.
Mhm.
Yeah, I assume that was intentional.
Yeah, and sometimes, I think it's that sense of listening. Oh, I'm listening to how this being moves. And then I realized later, oh yeah, okay, that's what that was showing me with this line. And some of the lines kind of stretch out or wrap around or break up. And I don't know, I try to just, with this work, maybe more than any other pieces that I've written, that sense of let me try to make sure I'm listening to something different than myself.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Another question I have to ask, and I think this is a little off the topic of what we've been talking about with the animals, but I know you also teach. And I'm just wondering how you manage to fit in time for writing, and so much thought that goes into your writing, and clearly so much connection with nature and the natural world. When I know teaching is a lot of staring at computers, So, can you say a little bit about that? I don't know, work-life balance and how you make that work.
Yeah, I mean it's hard. I think that during the school year I read more maybe than I write, but I do always do the writing activities with my students. If I'm asking them to do it, I just do it, you know. I sit there and do it. And it's not like I'm pulling out great lines while I'm at the head of the classroom, but it's still just, you know, we're all showing up together. That's part of what we're doing. I've been lucky enough to teach a couple seminar classes in the last few years where I've just come up with a new topic like 3 times in a row. And so that's been really fresh for me. Right now, we're going into the fall. I'm going to teach a writing our places and spaces class. Again, never taught this before, and we're going to literally spend each week in a different part of campus and,
Hmm.
you know, try to do transcripts of our places and interact with space and place in a different way every time we move around. So I think all of that, you know, just kind of keeps me really flexible. And even if that doesn't show up in my writing at the time, maybe a year later, I'm like, oh, there's that thing from that class I taught. You know, now it's simmered for a year, you know, now it'll come back in and pop up again. So first of all, I'm lucky enough that my classes have been they're pretty interesting for me at least.
Yeah,
I get a lot from the students and a lot from what I'm able to teach. And I don't think that would be the case if I were maybe teaching composition. I think I would have a much harder time. I really feel for my colleagues that are trying to write creatively and managing composition at the same time. I think that's really hard. Um,
yeah.
I do live in a really beautiful area, and I try to spend as much time outside as possible. That really feeds my writing. But I would say like the work, kids, writing. I mean, that is really hard. It is really difficult. And I'm okay with a fallow period because I'll let myself not write for a really long time and it does
Hmm.
not bother me. We're steeping, you know, I'm reading, I'm appreciating, you know, and then it comes when it comes.
Yeah, I think Linda Paston said something like, even when I'm not writing, I'm writing. It's like you're gathering the information, you're putting things together with very consciously or unconsciously. And you're on your third book. No, this is your fourth book. Yes?
Well, this is my fourth book, but I have kind of a funny situation. So
Okay.
this book came out in 2020. And prior to that, my best friend and I, Lauren Henley, we had written a chapbook together of poems that go back and forth answering questions, and asking questions, answering questions. It's called Dear Question, a conversation. And we finished that before 2020 and we sent that out forever and it finally got picked up by Glassfire and came out in 2024. But during the this time I was working on the forest poems and then I
Mm,
had this other kind of manuscript of just, you know, a sequence, regular kind of poems from my life, you know, whereas that's very different than this redwood poem book. And um, the redwood poem book finished, and that got picked up, so that's coming out in 2027 in February. And then I had this other kind of manuscript of you know, just regular poems, and I started sending that out maybe 5 years ago, maybe in 2023, and
hmm.
I just I couldn't quite get it. Some people would read it and say, you have some poems in here about dance, write more dance poems. So I wrote a bunch of dance poems. I tried sending it out like that. Didn't really work. Then someone said, maybe the dance poems are a chapbook. Why don't you send that out? So I did, and that got picked up, which is coming out next summer. Then it was just announced today that the other manuscript did get picked up by Jakar as the editor's choice, and that will come out in 2028. So there was like kind of 8 years of working with these various moving parts, and then they're all sort of coming out at the same time, even though I've been sending them out forever, Tresha. So I don't know how many poems, how many books there'll be at the end of 2028, but then I probably won't have another book come out for ages because I'm writing very slowly right now and
Yeah.
very happy to be writing slowly. That's totally fine. But yeah,
I
sometimes
feel
it's this tumble.
No, I'm very grateful for you for sharing that because that I'm sure that is very useful for everyone who is listening. And I feel like I know some poets who kind of find their topic and then they really hone in, focus in on that, and then that book is done, and then they start the next book and they really focus. I think I think and write a lot more like what you're describing here. And I want to say this because I hope it's useful to listeners, not just because I want to talk about myself endlessly, although I am a poet, so like I kind of do, right? But like I tried to put together a collection when I had 50 pages of poetry put together, and then it was like, but there's poems about my parents, and then poems about bears, and then poems that are really snarky and have, they're about being young and modern language. They don't all fit. And then so you just keep writing and you keep writing and you keep writing, and then you're not focusing on one thing. You wind up having like 5 books worth of poems that are about the bear, and then the 5 books of poems that are about your family, and the 5 books of poems that are about sex and relationships. So then one day or one year you have 5 books that come together, and then the process of sending them out, that's like another 5 years of them going out, being rejected, accepted, revised, and all that other stuff. And I'm just gonna say, we're nature girls, we're nature poets. There's something very organic about that. Nature
There
isn't like
is.
this. Nature is
Yeah.
not doing one thing at a time. Nature has a river, grows some trees, has a mountain, takes care of the foxes, and it all works together. So I'm going to use that as an excuse for why I do so many things at once instead of ever focusing
Oh,
in.
absolutely. I mean, I think there's a kind of messiness to that. I mean, I'm not going in with a project in mind. It's where am I led, and what shapes now do I have to work with? I certainly didn't, plan it this way, but this is the way that it happened. So
Well, speaking of nature and the natural world, this is my cat Pumpkin. Hello. Hi.
Hey, pumpkin.
I've done like a very little bit of research, and my husband, much to his credit, loves to like do these deep dives into why cats act a certain way. They don't recognize that our faces are people. Like they don't see in this with this depth perception. They're just like this is a flat screen to them. So yeah, sorry my cat didn't say hi to you. She didn't really recognize. Yeah. If you were
There's
here in person though.
there's a wonderful poet and comic artist named Lauren Haldeman. I don't know if you know their work, but they have this great new book called Wild That We're Alive. And one of the comics says, like, I'm pretty sure my cat thinks I'm just floating hands or something like that. And then the picture is just this great, like, hands just coming toward the cat, disembodied from the rest of the person.
I wish my cat thought about that. My cat knows I have a face every morning. She stands on my chest, she shoots her claws out, and she just taps my face until I wake up and feed her. Uh, I do think she thinks of us, all the humans in her life, though, as like we are her servants.
For
And
sure.
she's kind of right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for spending the hour with me. This has been such a pleasure. And, I was already familiar with your work, but I'm gonna get the next couple of books when they're available. I'm gonna keep reading. I will read poems you write that aren't about animals, but you just keep
There are
writing
many.
those
There are
animal
many.
poems. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something for everyone. I promise.
Yeah, well, one day, there'll be like the collected works. I think about this a lot as someone who, all the different books that are kind of like one day at the end when I've got all the poems I've ever written. Like, can I take them all and now recapitulate them and put them in new collections? Like, what if I do have all my animal poems next to all my urban poems next to all, it's like
Mm.
I don't know, like Leaves of Grass, like Walt Whitman was just constantly revising that kind of because he had the freedom because he wasn't I don't know, he had the freedom to do that. And I sort of wonder sometimes, like, maybe he had the right idea. Maybe you do want to reconfigure it every couple of years and add and subtract and revise. Anyways, that's just one more project. So
Let it all kind of be a flux state,
yeah,
I'm good with that.
yeah, yeah. Well, and readers can just pick it up and put it down. I don't always read a book straightforward. A lot of the time there's like three sitting on my nightstand and I pick and choose. So it's like the reader can also reconfigure them as they see fit as well. So
True. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And we will be in touch. And I hope I get to see you in person at one point in the world. And maybe
That would be lovely.
you can do whatever magic you do to make the foxes and the owls show up, and we'll just dance out in nature together under the moon.
It sounds lovely. I would love that. And thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the time and the great questions and conversation. Really a pleasure.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
All right.